really to talk about setup, but we did know and did acknowledge that some of you are going to be questioning what is it going to look like for our team once we get EVV or electronic visit verification set up and turned on. So we wanted to show you a little bit of a glimpse of what it will look like when you're ready. So right now, we released a build actually this morning that includes all required setup items for electronic visit verification, as well as the screens that you're seeing here, and a couple screens to come here. So this is what staff will see moving forward. So you can see in the corner of the log, it has an indicator of EVV telling the staff member that at least one of the consumers, in our case we only chose one consumer, but at least one consumer and the service that the staff chose are turned on for EVV. Once both of those items are met or qualified, if you will, the software automatically tells the employee this is an EVV transaction, and most importantly, it's going to change the time to be read-only. Because in the case of electronic visit verification, we need to know a couple of things. When did time work? In real time is what they're saying. They don't want someone to come in 3 hours later and say, I began work at 9:30 with this consumer at this location. The expectation of EVV or electronic visit verification is, again, when work starts, where were they with a GPS coordinate, and then what time was it? So as soon as it's met that a service that the staff chose, and one of the clients that the staff chose to begin service with, if they are requiring EVV, it will instantly go to read only for the time. It will use the rounding that's already established in your options. So if you're a 15-minute rounding, it will use those rounding rules. If you're a 1-minute rounding, of course, there's really no rounding that it's doing, but it will set to the real time. So staff will be unable to change that in live mode once both of those two qualifications are met. Of course, if they chose a service and or clients that do not meet EVV, it will operate exactly as it does today. So no change there. They will not see the EVV indicator, and they will be able to modify the time, assuming that they're not having to log in real time right now. I also have a secondary card here that's showing a change or a switch, an update as we call it, same concept. So this means that they already began work and then they're coming back to make a change or an update, in which case it will tell them that they're still in EVV mode or they're already in EVV mode. So this will be a key thing. This will be new for team members. Of course, this will be something that you're going to want to communicate to your team when the time comes for you to go live. If a client and the service they select does not require EVV, it will be just as it is today. They can modify the time. They could make any changes that they could make today. Next, we do have a new review mode. So you will see soon, if you haven't already, under the options for how you look at the review or how you're going to approve data, there's a new section called EVV to do. The reason that this is there is that there are some items or some adjustments that SAN data, in the case of Ohio, requires for a transaction to be corrected and or edited and resubmitted to them. So it may not necessarily have anything to do with time tracking as the data. For example, one of the things that we have to transmit to SAN data with this data is the employee's social security number, the client's Medicaid number. So if those are invalid when they make it to SAN data, they may reject that entry, and that will come into a case where your team will need to go and complete the adjustments or edits in the EVV to-do mode. So the first screen was to talk to you a little bit about what staff, as they're beginning work, are going to see. This is definitely going to be around what staff are going to see when they go to review and approve the entries. So again, if it's an EVV transaction, and if for some reason the data needs to be corrected so it can be resubmitted to SAN data, they will show up in this EVV to-do mode. So again, a new option under your reviewing and approving that you'll be communicating. I should also note that once we get through the setup, our plan is in a couple of weeks we'll be having a secondary webinar to talk about reviewing, correcting some of these entries. So again, today we wanted to kind of let you see it so you can begin formulating conversations with staff, managers, approvers, but we will go into more detail with these in the future. This is just to show you what you can expect the differences to look like. The next piece is what will it look like in the log? So if they were in service location log, if they were in staff log, if they were in my log, what you will see is a new indicator. So you will see the first indicator here is the E with the red box around it. The second indicator is just the E. So the E with the red box around it is an indicator that there is a problem. Something needs to be done with that transaction. So it means that we need to kind of do some more work, if you will. The second one is just really indicating to you it's an EVV transaction, but in the end, we don't currently believe there's an EVV quote-unquote issue from that perspective. So you will see these in the log views, excuse me. Again, if it's an EVV transaction, it's either going to have the red box around it, or it's going to have an open box around it. In either case, they're both electronic visit verification transactions. One is okay, one is not okay. So that's what those views will look like. The other screen that I wanted to show is if you are in the actual entry. So if you opened up the entry, again, you're going to see that EVV indicator at the top. And what you'll have the ability to do is to drop in to see some more detail of the EVV related entries. So this screen here will look familiar to everyone. This is very similar, if not the exact same, with the exception of that EVV indicator of what you're used to seeing today. But once there is an EVV transaction, you do have the ability to see the information as it relates to EVV. Ultimately, the things that are important for us to transmit to SAN data. I'm going to go ahead and step onto that next tab here, and this is the transaction, essentially, the important information as it needs to go to SAN data. So what you will see here is a status. So has it been sent to SAN data yet or not? The requirements for SAN data is that within a 24-hour period of the transaction happening. So in this case, the transaction started at 8:45 p.m. Their requirement is within 24 hours. So by 8:44, one could argue the next day, we would need to transmit that data to SAN data to be within the requirements of an alternate EVV system. So right now you can see in our example it's unsent. If it was already sent, that's okay. It will just move to a status of sent. What it will tell us next is what was the type of the call. Basically, that's a requirement for SAN data. They have them in certain categories or camps, so we will just be submitting how did we capture that data. And then you'll see the geo status. Was it a valid location or not? In this case, it was a valid location, which means that when the staff logged in, clocked in to begin work, and then clocked out, we could mimic and know that the locations that happened at matches a valid location for this client. I'm going to talk about that a little bit further here when we get to clients, but I just wanted to kind of make mention that that's what that means here. If you, of course, needed to make any changes, those would be indicated down here. So why did you have to make a change? There's some change reasons we'll talk about soon. If there was a note that was required, we'll talk about those, and then kind of when was the change made. What you will also see here is, again, the green color here and the red color indicates when did they begin EVV and when did they end. So in this case, we started and ended at the same location. That might not always be the case, but in this case we did. And this will have the same view that you would be used to today if you're doing anything with location tracking. You could zoom in or zoom out if you needed to see any more information. So again, if the transaction is an EVV transaction, this detail will be associated with it at the time that the transaction is kind of happening, if you will. So we're going to spend much more time talking about this in a future webinar, but we did want to give you an opportunity to see what is it going to look like. And technically today, if you turn all of this on, this will start processing right now. Now, we are going to recommend that you don't do all of that quite yet, and we're going to talk through each of the steps here. But we did want to give you an opportunity to see what will it look like. I think a lot of questions come up about what are our staff going to see, what are the reviewers going to see, what are we going to need to do. So we just wanted to touch on that briefly. And then we're going to spend the rest of our time today focusing on the setup changes that are required.